Hey everybody, Joe Turner here with a quick announcement. The AAME annual conference in June, which will be down in El Cajon, just outside of San Diego, California, is now open for registration signups. If you are a founding member, simply go into the AAME community, click on the registration link to sign up today. We are going to be opening it up to non-founding members in the very near future. If you are interested in joining the American Association of Municipal Executives and you want to join the wait list, all you need to do is go to the AAME homepage, click on the waitlist link at the bottom, or you can check the link in the show notes to get on the waitlist. We will be opening up the membership here very soon for new members. And if you want to join the organization and also go to the conference, you'll be able to do that hopefully within the next week or so. All right. I'm Joe Turner, and this is the City Manager Unfiltered Podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. It is the most influential local government podcast in the nation. And with me today is Donald Duncan. He is the county manager for Caldwell County in North Carolina. Donald, welcome to the program. I'm not sure. I'm drawing a blank right now. I'm completely freezing out. I'm not sure if you're the first county manager I've had on the podcast, but welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Joe. Thank you for having me on. Really have been following your work. I was kind of one of those guys that was kind of sitting over there, looking out the side eye and wondering what all this is about. And then I just want to say I appreciate everything you've done with James Freed and for James Freed and then bringing that to everybody's attention. It's been wonderful and enlightening. And I can tell you with all honesty, a lot of the managers in my area, we meet twice a month. And so we're kind of like, hey, did you listen to the last podcast yet? And it's kind of like you're whispering about it. So, you don't want the other ones to hear. And we're all members of ICMA. We're all members of our North Carolina Association, which is a fantastic association. And it's great to hear experiences around the country. But until you came on the scene, we would go to association meetings or ICMA national meetings, and basically it's group therapy, right? So you're facilitating that. You're like everybody's, dial-up telehealth therapist in this profession.
Donald, you're not far from the truth. I have a lot of people who call me up. I have crazy conversations on a weekly basis, literally. And the funny part is a lot of those conversations, they either start or end with, hey, this is all off the record. Like, you're not going to tell anybody this, right?
Amen. Yeah, that starts a lot. Yeah.
And so I joke around about me being one part therapist, one part counselor, one part, hellraiser. I've posted stuff in the past, and it's not a joke. It was, I was dead serious. I've had people send me messages, less so now because I've gotten more, I guess, quote unquote, mainstream. But when I first started, I had people who would message me and say, "Hey, I listened to you in secret."
Yeah, that's exactly true.
They're afraid to like my post on LinkedIn because they were afraid of what the consequences might be. So
how we got into you, or how I got into you, is somebody mentioned to me as you've been following this James Freed case, and then of course your name was synonymous with that. And we're heading over to ICMA Austin. We're getting on a plane, and I usually travel. The region always tries to travel together. We kind of coordinate, get similar flights, similar hotels, look after each other, kind of thing, and make sure nobody does something they shouldn't be doing. And so we're getting on the flight, and it's like, hey, what are you going to listen to? It's like, well, I'm going to listen to this podcast here. And so I got to start, your podcast on the flight, and I listened to like the first 3 episodes, and we hit the ground. Everybody's like, damn, do you believe that? That's insane. I can't believe they're doing it. And we all had been suffering through COVID, right? And we all kind of shared the same experiences that Freed had. We wanted everybody to do the right thing. We want to be good leaders to our communities. And we walk into ICMA and we find the first representative we can say, hey, this is wrong. This is not right. Y'all need to be doing something about it. You need to settle. We need to get this behind us, and we need to move on. And it's like, we can't talk about it. We can't talk about it. So that really, I think, really put a lot of us on the back foot and says, all right, what is our organization about? Because we had just went through a lot of push about DEI and how they were pushing DEI, in my opinion, I won't say the wrong way, but it wasn't the productive way. And of course, I'm a fan of it. I think we need to be inclusive. We need to make sure we look at everybody, because I tell everybody, I said, my job is to look after everybody, 8 to 80, blind, crippled, and crazy, red, black, and white. They're all precious in our sight, right? That's what we do. We look after society. And so it shouldn't be that exclusivity is what it turned into rather than inclusivity. And so there's a good friend of mine over at the SEI in Virginia at Charlottesville, and she teaches DEI, and it's the best lesson you'll ever have on it about here's how it should be done. It should always be from a place of love and loving your fellow human being,
Right.
and just figure it out that way. Not changing things because we want to be, feel more hip or more woke or whatever you want to say. It's more about, hey, we're doing this because it's the right thing to do to include people and make sure everybody has a fair shot. And so it I don't know. It's been fantastic to listen to your podcast. I just want to say I appreciate everything you've done. And I want to share some of my experiences in emergency management as a county manager and previously a city manager. And I worked my way up through as a firefighter. So I've been in 7, what I would call declared disasters, many smaller ones.
7?
7 declared disasters in different stages of my career.
Wow.
This is my first one as a county manager, and I got the big one.
This episode of the City Manager Unfiltered podcast is sponsored by Holbrook Asphalt. Maintaining your roads is one of the most difficult tasks for any city government. The good news is the secret to making it easier is only 3 letters. HA5. HA5 extends the life of roads and reduces the financial burden on your taxpayers. HA5 is an innovative pavement preservation treatment trusted by over 300 public agencies. It keeps good roads in good condition, reducing repair costs and saving taxpayer dollars. Join the hundreds of other cities making the smart choice. Choose HA5 for longer-lasting roads and a healthier budget. Learn more at holbrookasphalt.com/city. That's holbrookasphalt.com/city. Check the show notes for a link. I want to stop you there. I want to interrupt you real quick there, Donald, because I just want to say, first of all, thank you for your kind words. I do appreciate that because it means a lot to me. There's a lot of work goes into putting this podcast together. A lot of risk was taken. I've alienated a lot of people. I've pissed a lot of people off, and it's always nice to get that validation or affirmation from a peer to say, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. So thank you very much. And yeah, you talked about these disasters, and before we hop into that again, I want to circle back to something else too that's kind of going on that's germane to this time frame that we're in right now. And that is Summerfield, North Carolina. Now, I know It's always difficult to talk about another situation, and everyone knows all the facts and what have you. And I'm not going to ask you to weigh in the particulars, but I've been going to bat for Scott Whitaker in Summerfield, North Carolina. I feel he's been treated absolutely horribly by this governing body and the current town manager there, who I'm going to unpack here in just a quick second. But I want to give a shout out to Scott Whitaker, and I wanted to make sure that we talked about it since you're in North Carolina up here. And I just want to sort of get the lay of the land from you, if you don't mind commenting a little bit, like what's the thought process in the state of North Carolina, the Tar Heel state, when it comes to watching a fellow peer kind of go through the situation that he's going through right now?
So 2 things. Scott Whitaker is a fantastic human being. I've known him for at least 10 years, maybe longer. He and I were at ICMA Williamsburg together back when Marvin Collins, who's now in Wendell, was the manager in Williamsburg. And we all took that class together, had a great time, learned a lot. I encourage everybody to take that class. If you have not, you want to learn what America is really about, take that class. Go a day early, stay a day late, learn everything you can, because the group there is fantastic. So Scott and I were in the same group. We bonded there, had a couple meals together. And so to see him go through that is really heart-wrenching. And I know what he feels like. We have a system in this state right now of electeds that are running for office that have 0 qualifications. What they can get on their iPhone or Chat GPT, as we talked about earlier, is all that matters, right? They feel like they're
instant experts, right? So easy a caveman can do it.
Correct. And then they brought in a hatchet woman, Beth Woods, who has been seriously attacking local governments for her last tenure as the state auditor. It was absolutely horrible to a lot of people. Now, what you also need to know is in the background, I'm not going to talk about Summerfield because I don't know those people. I'm actually I don't know when this podcast is going to air, but I'm getting ready to transition to the city of Asheboro, and I love those people. And we're in the same regional cog, so I'm going to have to deal with them.
Right.
So I'm going to be very careful about what I say, but here's what you need to know. This all was very public. The General Assembly was incredibly unhappy with what was happening in Summerfield and how they were treating economic development and developers there. So my peers and I, several folks that I know, got asked to go and advise the General Assembly about what to do. And so there was a massive de-annexation there for undeveloped property. And all it was a guy wanted to develop. And these folks became what I would call aggressively stupid about NIMBY. They wanted to make sure that their town stayed the same the way it was. Culturally, they didn't want to be part of Greensboro. And all of that's understandable, but they went about it in the most aggressive manner.
Right. And Whitaker became the target of that angst or frustration and
Yeah.
anger.
So the manager tried to be the balance between the legislature, the board, and of course everyone else. So so Scott became the guy in the middle of the wheel that became the favorite of everybody's targets, and so he's suffering for that because he tried to do the right thing, and
Yeah.
that's all everybody needs to know.
Yeah.
And so as an association, and so we have a sub association too in the state of all the alumni universities, and ASU's alumni group is the strongest in the nation. There's no doubt in that, no question.
What's ASU for the
So
audience?
Appalachian State University Local Government Alumni Association, it's referred to not by us but by others as the ASU Mafia, and we and I could. There's a whole podcast on that.
I think every state has a mafia of sorts with their whatever the dominant MPA program is. But
Yeah, yeah. So ours is pretty good. I think there's about 700 or so positions that are managers, assistant managers, county towns in the state, and about half of them or so
damn,
are ASU guys.
wow, okay,
And we look after each other.
I
You know,
bet.
there's a whole thing that we have to take care of each other. So we're reaching out and working with Scott and our association president for the state, Rob Shepard, who's a fantastic guy, is helping out and doing good. And so I got to see Scott at our association meeting last week. He's doing well. His head's held high. He's under attack, and everybody needs to know that the story is not what you're reading about from. It's being told from the political perspective, not the factual one.
Yeah,
And so I appreciate everything you're doing
thank
to
you.
try to make sure those facts are coming out.
Yeah, I just find it absolutely disgusting and horrible what's being done to Scott. And I'm gonna be the bad cop and sort of go on a little bit of a riff here so that you can keep your neutrality, so to speak. Um, but they've hired this shyster to replace him by the name of Charles Twig Rollins, and I've been doing some digging into this guy. It does not appear they did any background check on him, or if they did not release it to the public or even possibly other members of the governing body. This guy has what appears to be multiple judgments, tax liens for failure to pay state taxes. And this is based off of a background check that was sent to me, an online background check. Um, nobody at the city council level, the town council, or the manager, Rollins, has come out and confirmed or denied that this background check information is correct or accurate or inaccurate. I did some digging on on his old Twitter account. This guy was selling like MLM insurance schemes, peddling that. He was selling adjustable beds and mattresses. I came across a report out of Wilmington with WWAY3 where troubleshooters, consumer investigative report team, was going and investigating him back in 2008, 2009, because he was doing bait and switch pricing, where he would do these super low prices to get people to come in and buy his furniture, and then when they get there, he'd say, "Oh, we're out of stock," and try to upsell them on higher priced offerings. A classic bait and switch scheme. In fact, I've come across the video. I'm going to release that soon. It'll probably be released before this episode of the podcast is aired. But there's a lot of shady stuff going on in Summerfield, North Carolina, and it's absolutely disgusting. They got this Beth Wood that you mentioned to. Thank you. She's a criminal. She's pled guilty to a couple of misdemeanors, misusing state vehicle for her own personal errands. She ran the vehicle up on the top of someone's hood because I'm sure she was under the influence. She fled the scene, a hit and run. And you got to tell me that this person is being brought in to assess whether or not Scott Whitaker was on the up and up. It's just absolutely horrible. It's reprehensible. And they need to be called out in Summerfield. And I'm just so pissed off by what I'm seeing. And I'm going to be doing probably another episode on this at some point. They need to be called out. And Donald, I'm not going to put you on the spot here. I don't want to do that to you because we didn't talk about this. But since we are talking with the North Carolina manager, and you talked about the North Carolina Association and ASU and whatnot, I want to send a message to the folks in North Carolina who are listening. You need to be standing up for Scott Whitaker publicly and privately. If you have an opportunity to bring him on as an assistant, or you have an opportunity to give him some consulting contracts or farm out some work that maybe you don't have the in-house capacity to do, you need to help him get by. His wife's battling cancer. She's, I don't know what they're doing for health insurance right now. He's gone past his severance that he negotiated. He was supposed to get 12 months and they screwed him on that, but he had to settle for 6 months because what do you do when your wife's battling cancer and you have no income and you're being basically screwed over by the governing body? And I'm sorry I'm going on a little bit of a rant here, Donald, but people need to go to bat for this guy. And I will say one thing further: the city managers in this profession, county managers, we need to sort of understand that it's important that we leverage our collective power as a body, right, as a profession, and we should be going after people like Beth Wood and GWI. So Beth Wood was hired by GWI. It's Greg Isley, tax consulting. They do local government consulting work in North Carolina. And if you are doing any work with GWI, you should be looking in the mirror and asking yourself why you're doing that, because he's hired this person, Beth Wood, to go out and persecute a city manager, smear that person. And, I'm going on a long rant here, Donald, so I guess I'll wrap it up. But I think our city manager, county manager Peters, need to take a good, long, hard look in the mirror and say, hey, why am I working with this company, or why am I working with these individuals who are hiring people who are going after our peers? I'll just leave it at that. Okay, Donald? But that's my little rant. I wasn't sure where I was going to go with that, but that's
Number one, it's your show, and number two, thank you for helping us stand up for him, because people need to know there's a
yeah.
lot of great people in this profession that are absolutely amazing, and
He is
they
like,
get put through the ringer.
I've never met him personally. I've only talked to him a couple times, and he's very guarded in what he shares with me. The guy's scared shitless, to be honest, because of what's going on and retaliation. Like, he won't even give me his contract to look, his separation agreement, because he's under. I won't get into that. But I mean, he's got a non-disparagement clause. He's like, Joe, I can't really get into it. I don't really want to get into it. It's tough. It's tough to go to bat and fight for somebody when everyone's got their arms tied behind their back or can't go on the public record. And that's why I'm here. That's why I started AAME for this express purpose, and I do the podcast. So anyway, I'll get off of that subject. Scott is a great guy. Seems like a really nice guy. I haven't heard one person say one bad thing about him, except for the shyster and the governing body over there, the council majority. Oh, so anyway, switching gears, Donald. Thank you for letting me rant and vent. Let's talk about your experience with emergency management, because you alluded to earlier that you've gone through 7 different declared disasters, which I can't even comprehend. And the most recent one, the big daddy of them all, probably for you, has been Hurricane Helene, correct?
Correct. I think it's important to note that in the last 6 months, we've had 2 of the largest natural disasters in the country's history, one on each coast. If you look at dollars, you look at loss of life, you look at damages, everything, loss of public infrastructure, to have 2 that close back to back is just unbelievable. And this last one hit 5 states, in
Yeah.
Helene. So it's a big deal. And we like to tell everybody that disaster begins and ends at the local level. If you're not prepared, you're not going to get the most out of FEMA. If you're not prepared, you're not going to do the most for your community. And I'm not here to scare everybody. I'm here to say, hey, just some words of wisdom, some things I've learned over the years. I am not an emergency management expert, but I have been through enough, and I got enough gray hair that I think I can tell you, especially for you young guys getting in the field, these are the things you need to know and you need to be working on right now, because the day will come, it will hit you. Preparation is the best response. Listen, I made it a mission when I came to Caldwell County is that everybody was going to get trained in ICS 100, 200, and then 700 and 800. And if you were in middle management, you were in ICS 300. If you went to executive level, you went 400. Now, those are online classes that you can take. Some of your classes can be offered by local training, but you need to know the basics. And this is easy stuff that you can add to your resume. It'll take you a few days to go through all the classes. It's not hard.
Can I step in here a little bit, because I'm gonna be a little real with you, right?
Yeah.
You can take these classes. I've taken them, and you can get them done pretty quickly online,
Oh,
as
yeah.
you've talked about. And even how should I say this? Even my being I did this in Kansas, where we get tornadoes, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I've never gone through a major disaster as a city manager, city administrator, but I can tell you that, and I'm just going to be honest and be real as a human being,
No, do it.
and I'm going to put myself out there, because I'm not Mr. Perfect at all. It's very easy to sit through and take those classes and get those certifications, and really just, it's perfunctory and obligatory. You check the box, and it's like you don't even think you're ever going to use it, or that you're
Correct.
ever going to need that information. And
And it's
so
boring as hell.
yeah, it is. It is. And so I guess I would say that, hey, one, it's easy to get done no matter what level of government you work in, if you want to go do it and take the initiative and be proactive and check that box. But two, be very serious about putting the time in and focusing on the content and the material, because it you may actually have to use it.
Oh yeah, and so I think what I like to pair it with, and what I've done in my classes and training, is we do tabletop exercises. Now, if you've got a professional emergency management on your staff or in your county, if you're a small town and you can't afford to do this, you're going to do these tabletop exercises and join in, and they're 2 and sometimes 3 day affairs. And you're sitting in this room and they're talking about stuff you don't know. So the taking the online classes is basically the vocabulary. That's really what it is. But then you got to put it into practice. And a lot of us don't have 2 and 3 days to sit down and commit to a tabletop exercise where we're blowing the world up, right?
And it's so
So
theoretical, right? It's so hypothetical. It's so like,
correct.
how does this relate to, right? I mean, I got to get back and work on this issue back at the
Amen.
office. I
Yeah.
know.
So what
Yeah.
we do is 20-minute tabletops, right? I do 20-minute tabletops because that's about all the attention span we got. And so I have leadership team meetings, and I sat down with North Carolina Emergency Management and my emergency management team, and I said, all right, give me a very simple scenario that could cause absolute chaos. And so it was a two-part scenario, it was 2 stages, and it was real simple. So we took the last 20 minutes of our leadership team meeting. We said, okay, guys, and I gave them, paragraph one. And paragraph one is there's an internet outage over a large area. We don't know what the problem is. Everybody starts making assumptions within the first couple of hours, right? And there is no timeline for when internet's going to be restored. How do you continue to operate services? So if you're the register of deeds and everything's filed electronically, if you're building inspections and everything's filed electronically, if you're the clerk of court and everything's filed electronically now, what do you do?
The internet going out is a natural disaster. I mean,
It is a
I
natural
mean, in
disaster.
today's day and age, that is a disaster.
So my CIO and IT team sitting there going, it's impossible. We've got all this redundancy built in for communications. Can't do it. It's not going to happen. It happened. This really happened. And so if you want to know about, we talked about the good, bad, and the earlier. I'll probably attach on to this one. It's like, think about if your gas stations are all open because electricity was restored to 30% of our county, but you still couldn't do any transactions. You couldn't even pay in cash because they still had to register running through the internet.
Yeah.
So you couldn't even walk up and hand cash to somebody. So every Walmart could not take a transaction, even though both Walmarts had power restored within 72 hours. You couldn't buy food, even if you wanted to, if you had cash. So people really started panicking, and that's what happened. And then in the second part of the 20-minute tabletop is it's like, all right, you're going to go off this week, and you're going to figure out how to operate your department with pen and pencil. If you can't do that, if you can't pick up a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil and operate your department, you're in real, real trouble. And that's what I tasked the whole leadership team with.
It's
How's
it's
this?
com- it's completely turned up on its head now, Donald, right? Because it used to
Yeah,
be that everything was done manually, pen, paper, right? This,
correct.
analog, right? Everything was done that way. And then the push to efficiency is everything's internet and tech and everything else. And
Oh yeah,
now we're so vulnerable to a natural disaster or any sort of outage. It's like it's a complete flip the script. It's
yeah.
everything's
We've got
reversed now.
correct, and we've got generators in all of our key areas, right? So we got power, but what if we don't have it? We can't issue warrants. If there's a domestic violence order, some guy has beat his wife up. How do we process and arrest him? We can take him into custody, but I can't process. It really is difficult. So I set the leadership team off to do that. 2 weeks, we meet every 2 weeks in leadership team. The leadership team came back together and they're all just like, ha ha, it's never going to happen. They hadn't taken it seriously. I said, all right.
When was this about,
So
roughly
this
speaking?
is great. So this started in July. We started doing this. So the second week come back and said, all right, here's part two of the lesson. There's a tropical storm coming in, and the forecast is it's a direct hit on your area. And you're going to, what do you do in preparation? You've lost internet. We can't even really get radar updates unless we can turn cable TV on and maybe, or we turn on traditional TV and we can find a radar. So, cell phones, you can get some cell phone signals working, but you're going to have to manage a hurricane with very limited communications now. So now things start coming into reality and a little bit more into focus. And we practice that scenario over and over all summer. So then during,
What was the impetus for you to focus on it this summer? Out of curiosity, was this? I mean, what was the drive there?
man, you got great intuition. So what happens is we had a tabletop exercise between us and a neighboring county in a large city, the city of Hickory, for one of the largest food distributors on the East Coast. It's called MDI. And we pretended if there was a major chemical spill at this food distributor and we had to shut down food distribution to at least 5 million people on the East Coast, grocery stores would be empty. So think about that impact. And this chemical agent leaked into the water supply because downstream is the water intake for the city of Hickory, who feeds a region of about 360,000 people with water. So, the city of Hickory's eyes were just wide open. I was like, these guys aren't ready. They're paying attention now, but they aren't ready to address this problem. So
Right.
I said, let's start off at a more basic level. And we all can't afford to do these 2-day tabletops. Let's figure out. So I called it 20-minute tabletops. And so we started practicing. The next thing that happened was we had a Western North Carolina regional managers meeting, and it was my turn.
I want to stop you right there, Donald, because you
Yeah,
just said a second ago that we can't afford to do all this time, right? That's like
correct.
but the reality is, right, when you have a natural disaster like this, the reality is that you can't afford not to spend the time doing it because this is the basic
Amen.
function of government, right? I mean, if that's the message that we need to send away to every single city manager or county manager listening to this podcast is that you can't afford not to spend the time focusing on these what ifs.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Couldn't have said it better. So we started preaching this at the Western North Carolina Managers Regional Association meeting. We meet every quarter, and it happened to be hosted in Hickory at the new Appalachian State University campus. So we brought in a wonderful guy by the name of August Vernon. Now, August was U.S. Army Medical Corpsman, did 3 tours in Iraq. So if you remember some of the videos of when they're on the highway from the Green Zone to the Baghdad airport and they're lifting bodies over these barricades, August is in one of those pictures.
Wow.
So he's the real deal. And he came back and he started teaching. He was one of the first ones to start teaching about mass shootings and how we should totally change our tactics, how we should have firefighters and paramedics in vests going in behind shooters and administering life-saving techniques, stopping the bleed right then, And now you see a lot of stuff called medicine in bad places and all that. August was the guy that kind of planted that seed because of his military experience, his familiar with emergency management, and his law enforcement context. He got everybody's mind going in a different direction when it came to school shootings, and we've saved a lot of lives with those tactics. And now we implement them in all kinds of things. So August is a smart guy, really down to earth, good old country boy, but a lot of experience. And so I said, August, I said, come over here and teach a class. Give me 45 minutes because we've got an election coming up. We know we're going to have cyber attacks. We know we've got a storm season coming up. I need to get my managers better prepared in my region because now I'm just the president of the association this year. I said, this is what I want to focus on. Get prepared, get your mind right. And so he did a 45-minute. Here's all the things that can go wrong in your world. And here's what you're not really prepared for. And before I keep scaring you to death, here's the things you can be doing that are small changes in each organization. And we leave the meeting and everybody's thinking, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, yeah. But
And
that's a big point that he makes though too. I mean, just because it's such an overwhelming, comprehensive problem, it can be just sort of where to even start. But for him to give you sort of like those little basic, hey, get some small wins, build some momentum here. These are things that you can start tackling so you can start
that's right.
orientating yourself to solving the big problem, right?
So this is August, and we pull out of the parking lot, and my clerk, who's also the assistant to the manager, was in the meeting, and she says, "Hey, we got a problem. There's a sinkhole on Highway 321. That's a 4-lane highway that's just a step down below an interstate, and that's the main corridor between our two counties, and it's got about 80,000 cars a day on it." And I'm like, "What do you mean a sinkhole in the middle of 321?" And it's kickoff weekend for university, college football.
Yeah, yeah.
And everybody's like, "Uh-oh, this is going to be bad." Right. And so I pull up and there it is. There's a sinkhole 5 feet into it and there's a water line breaking and we got water shooting 25 feet in the air. And so I called the town manager who was not in that meeting with me. He's good. And he's a new town manager in that role. This is his second assignment ever. He's never had a major emergency. And I said, Daniel Cobb, great guy, super dude. I said, you got a problem? He's like, yeah. He said, fire chief's out there. I said, well, highway patrol's already left. I said, that's crazy. I'm going to call you some more help. I said, what do you need? He said, I don't know. I said, Daniel, this is a major emergency. We're going to have, Friday night football. We're going to have Saturday football at the university. I said, the traffic's going to double for this game. He's like, oh shit, I hadn't thought about that. I said, where's your public works director at? He's on a cruise. He's in the
Ah,
ocean. So I called my public works director and I said, we're on it. And I called Town of Sawmills, which is the town next door. I said, send help. So we all jumped in as a team.
Oh, wow.
And we're there. I call my PIO. I said, you start working the phone, start working everybody. I call DOT. We're going to get traffic management plan going. So we had traffic management going out 3 counties out, all the way out to I-40 in Iredell County. And so at like
Is
11,
that common out there in North Carolina for agencies and counties and municipalities to get together like that? Because that's pretty amazing for you guys to step up and help each other.
it is honestly, it is character dependent. If you have relationships built, and that's one of the points I want to talk about. If you don't have these relationships, you don't have these contact numbers in your phone, and you haven't met and shaken hands with these people and broke bread with these people, during an emergency is not the time to get to know each other.
Right.
It's not possible.
You build that relationship capital before the emergency, right?
Yes, sir. Amen. And so we started getting everything moving. He's in Raleigh working on a grant for his town, doing what a manager's supposed to do. He comes running back about 11:30 at night. We get it sealed up, and we're starting to put the first loads of pavement on. And man, we're going to be ready to go by daylight. DOT's out there, and 6 feet away, this line shatters again. And
Wait,
we
what?
have,
A second
yes,
break?
second break, same location, shatters again.
Oh my
So
god.
it's just like absolute chaos. It can't get any worse, man. And so then they don't have parts, right? So my guys are out running around parts. We call the city of Hickory because all of the major water supply parts places are closed, and they're an hour and a half away in both directions. So we call a neighboring city and says, "Hey, do you have these parts?" And they said, "Yes." You buy us a part, and then you buy you a part,
Yeah, yeah.
replace it, right? That's how
Yep.
we do. And thank God for the city of Hickory and their public works department. Those guys are fantastic in utilities. They kind of like they have a massive warehouse of parts because they can't afford to go and wait that long.
Right.
So we're all going, hey man, can we get in your warehouse? Yeah, we'll send a guy over right now. What do you need?
That's
And
amazing.
so and
Yeah.
so we then our job is as the user, us or the towns, we say, okay, we're going to buy a part, so we've got it on our shelf, and we're going to buy a second part and give it back to them,
Yep,
right?
yep. And I know this happens on a small scale for, all across the country, but it's just amazing to see multiple agencies come together like this for such a huge issue, you know?
Yeah,
And this is the inside baseball stuff that I think that most people don't really even understand. The average citizen, the average taxpayer, they don't really understand this type of coordination or
correct.
relationship interaction.
So pre-planning and logistics is one of the things that we always talk about in emergency management and asset management. But part of pre-planning is relationship building and having those liaisons. If you like,
That
we
might be
had,
the most important thing, honestly,
yeah,
when you stop and think about it, right? Because when you are in a natural disaster or any kind of major issue, Donald, it's those relationships that you need to count on. I mean, because
correct.
it's a human people business, right?
So logistics and comms, right? If you don't have logistics, you can't feed people. If you don't have comms, you can't call for help.
Yeah,
Right. That's the number one and number two. And depending on which way depending on your disaster, which one's first, but that's what you got to have. And if you don't have that and you don't have pre-plans for it, and you don't have those pre-established relationships or even pre-established contracts for service, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So that's one of the things we like to do. And so that was kind of like element number two. We were building to this disaster all the way along. So then the third thing happens that really started pushing us forward is that this is a great story. So it's 10:30 on a Friday night. I'm sorry, 10:30 on a Sunday night. I got to set the stage for you. It's the end of August. It's hot, and there's a guy released from jail on domestic violence order because his wife wants him to come home so he can go to work on Monday morning. And it's a bad scene. I'm not going to mention their names. He walks out of our detention facility.
let me
He's
see if I got
walking
this. Let me see if I got this straight. The abuser who's in jail,
correct.
he basically the wife, who I'm assuming that's the person he's abusing,
Yes,
basically wants him to get released so he can go to work because even though he's abusive, they still got to put food on the table and feed the
correct.
family, right? Which is the okay, got you.
So
All right.
follow how a disaster begins. It's man-made created. This is the simplest of things. He walks out of our facility. This is all on camera. Makes a hard left and walks across our campus and goes to the end of our campus where there is a utility truck working on the local fiber optic cable from Spectrum.
Okay.
And this gentleman is in this truck and he's 25 feet off the ground working on a fiber split. Somebody's cable's out. They can't watch Netflix,
Yeah.
right? So he's there working on it.
Oh no.
Now, here's the part that I probably shouldn't tell, but I'm going to tell anyway. This utility worker, a great person, a good servant, told his supervisors, "Hey, this truck's safety device, where I'm in this bucket by myself, the truck can still be started and be left with. And they have a kill switch, but this truck didn't have it or it was broken.
Ah.
Our ne'er do well citizen climbs in this truck and takes off because he's got to get home. And he goes down the road at about 50 miles an hour, and the lineman lowers himself down on the harness, gets about 6 feet off the ground, ejects himself from the harness, and snaps his leg in the middle of a 5-lane highway called Highway 18. Then the vehicle wrecks and takes a hard right and crashes. Now here's the really freaky part. He just happens to he's trying to avoid two parapoles, and he avoids one. The second parapole he hits, and on that parapole is three 440 Delta transformers by Duke Energy. The other thing is two in-ground nodes of separate fiber optic cable. He clips both of those ground nodes, and in the air are two separate fiber optic lines that cover half of the western side of the county, all of the western side of Caldwell County and the eastern side of our neighboring county, Burke County, completely without fiber for 3 days.
Ah.
We had nothing. So remember the tabletop exercise. We actually used this redundant fiber ring and got off of our own personal intranet because trees kept taking it out. Everything was so expensive to maintain. So we went private with this. And this guy hits the one weak point in the entire system in 2 counties.
So
So
you'd never plan for that. You would never even think that would even be like a possibility that, you know.
And remember, go back to paper and pen, right? What do you do if the internet's out? And my staff is telling me it's not possible. It's just not possible. It can't happen. It happened. Well, this is 3 weeks before the hurricane hit. So we have Hurricane Helene's not even named yet. It's just out there off the African coast. Just
what is going on in what is going on in your head at this point in time when you've had these crazy situations? It's just like, wow.
Oh, my staff thinks I'm a witch or something. They're like,
I was going to say, I didn't want to say it, but man, like thinking, Donald's cursed or what?
I'm cursed. Yeah, I've cursed them, right, because of this whole scenario. So it's like bad things happen, guys. You've got to be ready for it. You've got to think. You've got to be prepared. You've got to have this idea of all the time, that what if something breaks? What am I going to do? And so you got to have.
Man, you got this internet goes out for 3 days, and this is like what, 3 weeks or so before Helene.
3 weeks before Helene. So
you guys had a really good. I mean, you guys are certainly top of mind, conscious of the possibilities at this point. Like, this is not a joke. This is not a hypothetical that could never happen. This is literally we're like. I gotta tell you, I'm 40. I'll be 48 in April. I've never lived on really any serious time on the East Coast or in a hurricane area per se. Helene came along, and me growing up in Southern California, I never even thought that Helene was even going to be an issue for you guys in the coast of North Carolina or whatnot, because it's so far away. And this came up through the Gulf side, right? I mean, which was sort of not typical in the sense that, this wasn't like an Atlantic-based sort of storm coming into North Carolina. So I'm not a hurricane expert by any stretch of the imagination. I don't play one. I didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn last night. What level of anxiety or concern did you have when Helene pops up on your radar?
So this is one of the great stories, right? We had a couple of small tropical storms that, hey, the spaghetti models, right? European, American models, they're all doing their thing, and we're watching and we're getting ramped up. And I've got some really super emergency management guys on my staff, and one is Vic Meisenheimer, our emergency management director and incident commander. He's got 7 deployments. He's retired highway patrolman. Guy's no joke. He's serious, very serious individual. Then I got Jeff Caldwell, who's over there. He's got 35 deployments. City of Charlotte firefighter, North Carolina emergency management. Went to work in the private sector in emergency management. So I got the A team sitting right there with me, and we're just sitting there grinning. We're grinning because if you're in emergency management, you're like, hey, this is Super Bowl, right? COVID was it, man. We were all ramped up, and now you got this big one coming, and you're like, okay, we're getting ready.
Game time, right?
Yeah, we start our preparation. You're going down your own checklist, your personal checklist, what you got to do. And everybody else is kind of walking around having a normal day. And I said, okay, it's a week out and there's a tropical storm inbound. What do you do? So here's what you need to do. This is what everybody needs to do. So we started, back forecasting. Okay, we think we're going to have landfall on Thursday, maybe Friday. Gas, generators, chainsaws, all the basic stuff that you're going to need for recovery. Is this equipment piece running? Is this radio system up and running? Are batteries charged? All the physical infrastructure you can lay hands on. You're preparing your mind. And it's just like in your home, right? Where the storm's coming, Are the windows battened down? Do we have extra batteries? Do we have candles? Do we have fuel? The same thing that you would do in your home, we're doing on a massive scale, countywide scale, 85,000 population we got to take care of. And so we're checking in with our managers and we're like, okay, you guys ready? Clean storm drains, right? Very
Yeah.
simple things. What you can do by going around and cleaning your storm drains out and do it every month. Don't just have it when a storm's coming. You're preventing, it's hazard mitigation, right? But it's also mental preparation and it's muscle memory. I know where this piece of equipment is. I know what kind of shape it's in. I know I can lay hands on it and I know it's running. It's not just preparing for a storm. It's for any type of situation. So you start that. It's just like, going to the gym every day or,
Or exercising your valves, right? I mean, I
yeah,
don't mean literally. I
correct.
mean literally and figuratively, right? You basically
Yeah,
you're going through the process of the motions. Like, okay, mechanically speaking, nothing's getting tired, nothing's getting seizing up.
correct.
There's no
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So what we did is we said, okay, we're going to start a group team meeting of all of our ancillary organizations, all my
Is this all within Caldwell County
yeah,
itself, or is this a
on.
okay?
Yep. So I said, okay, we're going to set up. We're about 5 days out now. I'm going to have what we call all hands meeting, and we just set up a Zoom call. It's very simple.
But what is your
The
mindset at this point in time? Like, how worried are you? I mean, I know you're going through the steps at this point because you're being prepared and it's the right thing to do. You're being professionally responsible. But
Correct.
in
Yeah.
your head, are you thinking this is going to happen? Or
So give me a second to get to that answer because
okay,
I think it's important what we did and how it affected some people. So we're getting there and we're getting more and more data. The forecast is firming up, but we're also having a rain event at the same time. So before Helene got here, we had a front came through it that dumped 8 inches of rain before the hurricane hit,
wow, okay,
and that's in almost all the county. In our northern ends of the county, up near Grandfather Mountain, we got 12 inches of rain that week before the hurricane got here. And so what it's called is called the Fumiyashi effect, where you have two fronts that are in less than 500 miles apart, and then they start to merge and they start to develop energy off of each other. So you had a tropical storm turn into a hurricane, went over the Gulf, picked up extra energy, and then merges with another storm that's already impacted. So Helene was a once in a lifetime event, maybe once in 100 years event, and so you had all this extra energy that was being dumped on your area. And so I'm sitting there reading stuff and I'm learning about the Fumiyashi effect. And it's like, all right, we're going to start having team meetings on everybody, all hands on deck. So we got DOT, we've got Duke Energy, we got all of our municipal partners. We've even got churches involved. And we said, okay, everybody gets a Zoom invite. We just send it out to this mass. Whoever participates. So we turned the camera on Tuesday, and we were going to not declare a state of emergency until Wednesday. And so we're talking, and we get our latest forecast from the National Weather Service. North Carolina Emergency Management jumps on the phone, and we start talking through our prep. Have you done this? Have you done that? And then we start going through the list. And I went from the smallest to the greatest, of organizations. I let the little guys talk first. And then so we get to the end of it, and I say, okay, guys, I think by now we all know we're in for a serious event. Let's pray it doesn't become terrible. I said, for those of you who believe in God, start praying now. For those of you that haven't found one, you better start looking for one.
yeah,
And so I got phone calls after that from three other managers going, hey, man, this always became very real. So we were out in front of the storm. We were out in front of the storm a week ahead. We were out in front of the storm a month ahead. We were out in front of the storm 2 months ahead for all this prep work.
amazing.
And it wasn't because we knew a storm was coming. It's just we know events coming. We were actually thinking in our minds that we're going to roll into November, late October, with a massive cyber hack on a major agency, either from the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, or any other number of unfriendlies to the United States against the presidential election. That's what we had in our minds.
Yeah,
So we were already prepping. We were just prepping for man-made event versus natural event,
right.
and it started rolling in. So the same prep time, the same prep work, all work for everybody. But now I think there's another thing too is we need to talk about is that after the storm comes through, starting to disaster response and recovery. I got to survive my first tornado. I got to see it go over my head. I was on top of a building. That's pretty shocking. There's all these other things that you need to talk about, but I think the big thing is that balance, and I mean fund balance. If you don't have a healthy fund balance in your community and you have a disaster hit, you're going to be in one of these categories where FEMA calls you up and says, "Hey, we've got a deal for you," and don't take it because it means you're not prepared. And it's a $5 million low
Wait.
interest
Let's
loan.
let's unpack that for a second. I want to
Yeah,
sure I'm following you. Okay, so you're saying that if you unpack, just reword
Correct.
that for me a little, because I'm not sure if
So,
I tracked what you're
so
saying.
if you're a small community or even a large community, you have to maintain a significant amount of cash reserves in order to prepare for disasters. We call it fund balance in North Carolina.
Right. You just mean you mean that obviously just in the financial sense of being able to have immediate access to cash, right?
Correct.
Essentially.
You've got to
Okay.
have immediate access to be able to start recovery, disaster, whatever it is.
Right.
Debris removal, moving materials out of roads. You've got to pull up contractors. You're going to need millions of dollars, and most communities haven't prepared for this. And that's the biggest preparation you can do. And so, for those, our state mandates it by law. If you live on the coast, most of these places are carrying greater than 50% fund balance. We're having to carry in Caldwell County a 20% fund balance because of our size and the level of services that we deliver. So if you've
Gotcha.
got $100 million budget, you got to have $20 million sitting in the bank somewhere,
Okay. Got you.
and
And
you will burn through it.
how does that tie into what you're saying with FEMA? That's where I was kind
So,
of making sure.
so if you're not one of those communities and you're not adequately prepared, if you're a smaller community and you don't have those kind of cash reserves, they're going to walk up and they're going to offer you something very nice, and it's a low interest loan of $5 million. You got to pay it back in 3 years.
Okay.
There's no way you're going to be able to do that. So you need to start thinking now of cash reserves.
I'm
Now you
tracking
might
you. Okay.
you might get lucky, and the Congress will declare, okay, because this area is so poor, we'll do a forgivable loan. We'll go ahead and turn it into a grant, and I'm using
Right.
air quotes, but that's not how it's going to operate. And if you're not thinking about you need major cash reserves, you're already defeated. Number one, you got to have money on hand. So I walked in a week after the event. We had a call meeting already for another purpose, and we said, let's just keep the call meeting. Everybody get here. We're going to appropriate $2.5 million to start cleanup with. Just day one. How'd you come up with that number? I said, I have no idea. It's going to be way more than that. We're already probably looking at about $11, $12 million cleanup. I said, this is to get us started. We were still doing damage assessments and trying to figure out how
Right.
much we had.
Yeah.
And so we all jumped in. The other thing about this disaster that was quite unique was the amount of topography that we have sped the water up. So if you're in Florida, and we love Florida, if you're in eastern North Carolina, and they have hurricanes all the time, right? I mean, that's just like, that's,
But it's flat, right? The land's
yeah,
flat.
the land's flat and it's porous because it's mostly sand. Here, our land is granite and steep. So what happens? It turns into flumes. And so all these beautiful mountains turn into raging rivers that are these nice little mountain streams, and they elevate 15 and 20 feet overnight, and or in some cases even higher. We've got mobile homes and RVs that are 30 feet in trees. Imagine
Wow.
doing that. So it's just you can't fathom it. And so FEMA had never dealt with flooding in the Appalachians of this scale. The last time it happened was in 1916, and we surpassed all those marks from 1916. FEMA didn't exist, right? We were, the council manager form of government was brand new at that time. So none of the systems we have in place, and the population was significantly less because of World War One. Mostly, we didn't have all of these disasters to contend with and all this infrastructure. So now we're losing bridges that have survived dozens of floods over decades that are getting wiped out. And then we have roads that are completely gone. So what happens is DOT then goes into crash mode and they're trying to rebuild everything. So they don't have time to go and get debris too. They're trying to build bridges and haul stone.
Right.
So that compounds the problem. So normally in debris removal, we would have all of these commercial haulers come in and just start picking up stuff in mass.
Right.
Well, all these commercial haulers can go make more money hauling stone for DOT, hauling millions of tons of stone. So we're actually competing against our own market. And that has slowed debris removal and recovery in Western North Carolina.
Makes sense. I didn't think of that. I wouldn't think about that until obviously you mentioned it, but that makes sense.
Yeah. So, normally we would say, hey, we'd pick up the phone and we'd call somebody like an SDR or others and say, come help us. We got a prearranged contract with you. And we'll talk about that more. And you guys show up and like, all right, everything's fixed in 2 months. Mm-mm. So just Caldwell County alone, if you can imagine a stadium, and I think you're familiar with the Western stadiums. We'll talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Everybody knows that stadium. It's got the really
Yep.
cool screens on either end. So think about this. Think about that as a giant bowl. Just the debris in Caldwell County, one county out of 30 in Western North Carolina, one county will have more debris than it will fill that stadium. It will overflow. Just that alone. So I'm trying to put a story with the numbers here.
Yeah,
So that,
illustrate it. Yeah.
yeah, that volume is massive, and you don't have the workforce that you normally would have had in any other disaster to come and do it. So that has really hampered us. So I would advise every county or city to have a debris management plan.
Let me pop in here real quick then, because in a lot of major storm events, you will have contractors from out of the states, different states come in and migrate in. But Helene was such an expansive sort of disaster with multiple states and counties. I assume that even that traditional sort of market adaptation or dynamic aspect of the marketplace had happened, but was still muted because of the size of this disaster. Is that correct?
Correct. Oh yeah. So you hit right on it. So remember, you had hurricanes back to back in Florida. You had Helene, and then less than 10 days later, Mint. So a lot of those contractors come out of Florida, Southern Georgia, where they're used to doing this on a consistent basis, and they come up. Well, they're the ones hit. So are they going to leave when they can stay at home,
Right.
right? And so you have that problem. Same thing with Eastern North Carolina. A lot of those workers just come, first counties they got to in the West, and they started working. Some of them got deployed early, and they went to other states. So you have a competing market, and that market oversaturation is what we have. And then so the price of hauling it goes up because there's not it's supply and demand. There's not enough haulers, so the rates go up. And FEMA says, no, this is our pre-negotiated rate. Or North Carolina Emergency Management says, no, this is our pre-negotiated rate. So that contractor goes, I can make more money in Tennessee, or I can make more money in South Carolina, or I can make more money in Georgia. They have their pick.
Right.
So it compounds recovery time, and it compounds the cost. And we've had to deal with that. And that has been very, very difficult. So I would advise everybody, have your own prearranged contract. That was the way we used to do it. When the state come in and said, you know what, guys, let's just have one prearranged contract that has multiple vendors on it, and everybody can just elect to use it. All you got to do is sign the form and fax that sucker in, or scan it in and email it if you can get email. So that's what we did. And the problem is now you're competing with everybody. So
Right.
if you have your own prearranged contract, and you need to do this as municipalities, if you're a larger city, do this. If you're a small city, you and your partner cities, your sister cities, and your county need to go in together and do this. If you're a rural county like we are, that's what we did. And I'm telling you right now, that is a game changer if you have a prearranged contract. Do not rely on the state's prearranged contract, because guess what? Ours is 5 years old. So guess what's happened to inflation in 5 years?
It's mind-boggling.
So we're at the bottom of the market in our contract numbers, and so we can't get good competitive pricing. So
So I would imagine you've had to triage just your debris removal then, right? And had to basically, basically put a hierarchy there, like, we can wait on doing this later. We got to do this
correct.
now, right?
Yeah, you prioritize. It's called cut and shove. You're opening up the right of ways for emergency traffic, and then you go back and you clear them out so local traffic can get through. That's kind of your first 72 hours, right? And then you've got bridges out. So it's like, we're not going to get to that area until we get a bridge in, or we get a way to cross the stream. And we had a lot of those where we're fording creeks, things like that, high water vehicles, and all the fun, cool stuff that everybody gets to do. But then what I'm telling you is your response from the U.S. government is massive. It is so massive you cannot fathom it. They will throw more at you than they can normally do, that you can handle. You can't fathom what's about to happen to you. So if you're in Caldwell County on the first week of October, it looked like Kandahar. I mean, it was Black Hawk, Black Hawk, Chinook, Black Hawk, Black Hawk, Chinook. I mean, there was not a time when I could not walk out of my office and see the airspace covered. Plus, we had volunteer Air Force people. We had people from all over that had brought in their own airplane, brought in their own helicopter. And so we pulled up the radar.
Are
Where we
these
could
are these
see
private citizens or organizations? Or I assume
private.
both, or what?
Most of them are private citizens. They're a loosely affiliated confederacy. Some of them are nonprofit corporations, and they just come in to help for a few days, and then they're like, we need fuel, right? So who's going to pay for the fuel?
Right.
So another thing is we need to, as a nation and as a country, mobilize our local volunteer air forces. And these are people that want to help. They want to do something, but they got to get something in return. They got to get their costs covered. So I can tell you some crazy stories about airports with the city of Hickory, with us at our airport. When you have, I mean, that's part of the good and bad ugly we'll talk about in a minute. But
We're getting a little long in the tooth here in this episode. I know you have a lot more ground we want to cover, so I think we're going to turn this into a multi-part episode, so you don't feel rushed to get through it. As we migrate into this into part one. You're talking about airports a little bit. I want to give you an opportunity to expand on that, or have some final thoughts. And then also, I know you have some thoughts on what you've experienced, what you've witnessed in this whole ordeal, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I want to give you a chance to maybe kind of bring part one of this episode to a finality, and then we can go on to part two.
Yeah, so we were talking about your volunteer Air Force coming in, and so they're going to take over an air wing, and they're going to establish themselves. Some of these are ex-military, some of these are just local hobbyists, and they're going to take over a local airport, and you've got to be prepared for that. What do you do with them, and how
What
much?
what what are they primarily doing in their capacity as a volunteer Air Force? What role are they serving? Are
So
they
they were doing
doing
emergency
reconnaissance
missions,
or?
both. They had initial reconnaissance. We had some that were doing immediate deliveries, taking in, what supplies they could load up and carry. Some were bringing in supplies from other areas. And so we're then turning the local hangars into warehouses.
Okay.
And so it became this massive air wing operation because all the roads are down.
Yeah.
40 is gone. There's no way to get into the mountains. So we're begging for military help. I mean, I'm on the phone with senators saying, hey, we need military deployment. Well, we got the Guard coming. I said, no, you don't understand. We need people, young, fit men and women that can be dropped out of a helicopter in rural North Carolina and hike and be left alone and feed themselves and communicate by themselves for 3 days and
Wow.
give me damage assessments. And they all kind of start twisting their heads going, oh, this is
Yeah.
bad. This is
Yeah.
real bad.
I can't wrap my
So
head around that because normally in a disaster you're thinking, okay, the good guys show up, they got their badges or their guns or their jackets, and they just go out and save the day. But here it's like they can't even get to the place they got to get to, right?
yeah, a horse would have been better, thinking about that than helicopters. And we had that. We had mules. We had goat teams. We had people that were hauling in supplies and medicine by mules and goats. It was fantastic. I mean, so the amount of volunteers that you're going to get just blows your mind. And a lot of them come in through air service, and they're really, really good people, but they're very disorganized. Not that they're ill intended.
Right.
There's,
How
they
how,
want
how
to.
can they be organized, right? I
Correct.
mean,
So
yeah.
we need to, as an organization of local governments and states and federal government, is have a mobile air wing of volunteers and say, okay, here's the rules. Here's how we're going to work because here's what happened. I'm going to pick on the city of Hickory because I love those guys. They're great. They're a strong organization. They have a fantastic airport. Their airport and Statesville Airport became central for all these volunteers. So it shut down all local traffic because they had 50 or 60 helicopters from private citizens sitting there making sorties every day. Some of these
Wow.
guys are flying 10, 12, 15 sorties a day. And they're like, hey, we're running out of fuel. Can you give us some fuel? And the city manager's going,
Where do you
well,
get the fuel, right?
yeah, how am I going to pay for it? Right?
Yeah.
Are my citizens paying for it to help somebody else 100 miles away? So you got to figure all that out. That's one of the things we got to do. We got to have fuel contracts that are prearranged. This is okay. Here's the allotment for this scale of disaster, and then somebody can permit and let it go up. The other thing, some great stories that happen with air power that we have in this country, and it's absolutely phenomenal, is that we're on the ground and we're saying, okay, we have a crash at the Hickory Airport, and I'm looking at this through our mobile system, and the instant commander looks over and says, we got a crash at Hickory Airport. So I pick up the phone, I call the
This is
city
a real
manager.
crash. This is not a
There's a real
hypothetical,
crash.
right? Is this
This
during
really
the
happened.
actual? Is this during the
This is
actual
during the
plane
recovery.
recovery? Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
so we're this is day 3, right? And we got a plane with a nose gear broken on the ground, and it's blocking the runway. And Ivanka Trump had flown in, and she was there. And so you got these celebrities, coming in and trying to be a part of the scene because the Hickory Airport now become like Mission Central,
Okay.
and all these politicians from around the state and the nation are coming there and meeting at the Hickory Airport, and all these volunteer air people are coming in with their helicopters and airplanes, and they're trying to help. And one old guy, great dude, flies in a plane full of water for flying water in, right?
Yep.
And he lands and he breaks his nose gear and shuts down the whole airport. So I call him. I said, Warren, what's up? He's like, I need some help. I was like, what can I do for you? And he's like, can you get your airport up and running? I said, I didn't know my airport was down. It's like, we will get our airport up and running. I grabbed some IT guys from the city of Lenore. I grabbed some National Guard guys, and I grabbed some fire marshals. And I said, get our airport up and running. What do we need? I don't know, but get out there and find it. We have a local, very small airport that we share between 2 counties and 2 cities, 5,200-foot runway, and it's a ghost town. And they had no power and they had no comms. We got comms up and running. We got some generators out there. We start landing all of the military aircraft that are trying to get into Hickory. We start taking load off them. It's
Wow.
okay. You're going to fuel here. You're going to start running sorties out of here. Before we got that up and running, another regional airport in Rutherford County had a plane crash. Plane lands, has a mechanical problem, catches on fire on the runway, shuts them down. So you had, at one time,
Do you even, I
we
mean,
had
dumb question, Donald, but do you even have emergency personnel at the airport? Because they're out in the field trying to save everybody,
correct,
right?
correct. Yeah. Yeah. So you're seeing the compounding of the problem.
I mean,
All this,
you don't keep somebody, you don't keep a fire truck at the airport when you have a Helene response, right? I mean, you're not
correct.
how wild. Wow.
All of this help is getting, is actually bogging down. There's becoming this massive logjam for help. And it only takes one or two small things that are normal, average, everyday occurrences to start breaking it.
To really gum up the works. Yeah.
Now, you've got to also, at the same time, we're decompressing hospital patients out of Western North Carolina hospitals. I mean, there's people that are using defecating in buckets,
What do you mean by
right?
decompressing? You mean
So
helping?
there's, yes, patient load in hospitals is having to be flown out. Now, this is one of the big failures of our system is once there was a hurricane forecasted and we had 72 hours notice, we should have been bringing patients out of those hospitals. But no one thought to think about that as part of the state of emergency. And so those hospitals, that's money that they're going to have to pay to transport somebody to another hospital, and they're going to pay them money, right? And
You mean you should have been thinking about removing them out of the hospitals because in order to get them keep them safe and get them care at another facility,
correct,
or to create supply for the demand that you're going to have from the response?
both,
Okay, okay,
both.
okay.
So you were having people that needed acute care, and there's no power. You had people that needed acute care, and there's no water. We had 3 hospitals around us that were completely submerged in their lower levels, right? Or they had lost water and they had no way to clean things, or they had lost water and power. And so, what do you do in a hospital with no water, no power? Nothing. It becomes a morgue
Yeah.
really quick, right? And I'm not blaming anybody. This is nobody's fault. It's just things we didn't anticipate. We didn't think this far ahead. So now, in the middle of response, we've got people going in, we got people coming out, and they're coming out in helicopters, and they're trying to fly people out. And so, how do you triage all these patients? You're not triaging them in the field, which is what we should have been training with. With proper military personnel in the field, like we'd asked for, we could have been triaging the field. No, we've medics, air medics going, picking up, taken out, and they stop at the Hickory Airport. And so now you had people actually that was breaking in to the airport and trying to steal medical records so they could take in and get prescriptions from them. This
Wait.
really happened.
Say this again. You had what now?
So we had people, nefarious citizens, breaking into triage tents, our field hospitals on the ground, and trying to get prescriptions that these patients had so they could take and get them filled to get whatever medicines they thought they needed. Because you got to remember, you couldn't get prescriptions. You had no internet.
Because there's no communication back and forth between the systems,
Correct.
right?
So people are trying to steal prescriptions from other people and then take and try to get it filled. It was insane. So we actually get a call and says, does Caldwell County, now this is a neighboring county, do you have lockable filing cabinets that you're not using? Yes, we do. Can you get them down here to us at the airport? That was
This wasn't on the emergency preparedness checklist,
no.
right?
So when I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, you're sitting there in incident command in the EOC, and you're looking at each other, and you're going, "Why are they asking for this?" And it's you get a digital request, right? And there's like, "Okay, can you get them here? Get them here now." I'm like, yes, we can. What do you need? Da, 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 da. And we're gone. I'm deploying people, pick up trucks. We got 3 medical cabinets or lockable cabinets going down for medical files, right? And you're sitting there going, "Oh my God, what is this? What is really happening to society?" So that's part of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Another one is, so we're there, and I'm in the EOC, and I walk over to the corner office to have a private conversation with a small team, and we would do this. We would be in the EOC. It was like, all right, we need to take this conversation outside. So we go grab a corner office, and I see our armored personnel carrier from the sheriff's office roll out with purpose and an escort, and I'm like, why is my armored personnel carrier rolling out? And so the emergency services director walked in, and I asked that question out loud to myself, and he says, "I think I can answer that, sir." I said, "Okay." He said, "The school system's fuel truck has been stolen. This is the fuel truck, the giant yellow fuel truck that rides around and fuels up all the buses every day."
Oh
So
no.
because you couldn't get fuel,
Because someone needs fuel. They're desperate to get fuel, right?
so the school bus garage is a block away from my house. I drive by it every day, twice a day. And during the storm, all the camera systems are down because the internet's down. electricity's down, so they just drive the fuel truck right out the gate.
Ah,
And so then it's like, okay, this is new. This is new. So we're
again, not
dealing with,
really on
yeah,
the checklist that you think
no.
that not really.
And
Uh,
I'll do one more for you. This is a good airport one, and the reason the airport's involved is that a lot of our state and federal elected officials met at the Hickory Airport, and they're game right. They're figuring this out. They're like, we need money for this, we need to do that, we need to change these policies, and they're sitting around, folding chairs and white tables. Famous people, you see on TV every day. And so I had not had a decent cup of coffee in several days, and so I made it my mission to go. And this is like a weekend to go to Hickory to the Starbucks that was open, and I stopped and got a cup of coffee. And as I'm coming through, and I'm kind of doing my decompression and meditating, driving up the road, the phone rings, and it's a local elected official. I'm sorry, a state elected official, great guy. He says, "Where can I get my hands on 1,000 body bags?"
ugh,
And so I'm thinking, in my brain is like, "What do I look like?" And so I was very smart alecky because I was my decompression time was interrupted, and he's a good friend. I said, I'm not in the body stacking business. I'm in the body saving business. That's what we do. I said, call a morgue. And so he wasn't happy. And I could hear all the people in the background. I could hear U.S. senators in the background. I could hear very important people in the background. This is a real problem. And it was all because of all the TikTok messaging that was going out from these social media warriors that are out there saying there's bodies everywhere. There's bodies everywhere. And it was not true. A lot of them was dead animals that had washed away into debris piles, and they're
right.
going through and in the smell, right? So it was this overreaction, this huge overreaction. And so I had a few sips of coffee and I calmed down and I said, okay, I'm going to call him back. And I said, okay, pick up the phone. And I said, all right, I think I got a solution. I said, who's in the body stacking business? He was like, well, I don't have time for your smart alecky comments. I was like, no, no. And this is part of the bigger thing about emergency management. I don't have time for your smart alecky comments. I said, well, I said, here in the United States, we have the U.S. military, and that's their job, is to stack bodies.
Right.
I said, call down to Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty at that time. I said, and tell them you need body bags. And I said, they'll fly them in here. We'll get them. So nothing happens, no more out of the conversation. I kind of felt sorry for smarting off to my friend. I was in a mood. He was in a mood, but that's part of the whole emergency management experience is you got to know when you're there and you've got to figure out how to, you got to be emotionally intelligent and pull yourself out, and you've got to be able to call other people out, and you've got to be willing to accept when someone calls you out.
Right.
So I called him out. He called me out. We're good. And we're still best of friends. So a week later, I get a phone call from some guy. He's like, hey, I got 1,000 body bags coming to your warehouse. Where do we need to put them? I'm like, okay. I was like, where did you get 1,000 body bags at? No, never mind. I don't know why. He said, no, it was very easy. We went on Amazon and we bought 1,000 body bags. They're on sale this month. They're $1 off a piece. This is matter of fact conversation. This really happened. I said, here's the address. Send them on. So a day later, they call and says, all right, we need 300 of those body bags. We're flying them west. Can you have them at the airport? Yes, sir, we will. That's the kind of stuff that happens. This in the moment, surreal insanity that you've got to be able to roll with and go, okay, there's a bigger mission here. There's a bigger picture here. I'm not gonna be that guy. I'm gonna follow my orders. I'm gonna get it done.
It's
And that's
tough.
what you got to be able to do.
It's tough. You got to handle a very stressful situation and keep your wits about you, but also we're all human beings, and man, that's a lot to go through. Out of curiosity, what was the final death toll count for your guys'
I'm
county?
going to get this wrong. I can look it up for the next one, but I think we're at 157. In our county, we only had one, and that was
You only
someone.
had one fatality in your entire
We were,
county.
yeah, we. I mean, dude, we were sending out messages. We were telling people get prep. We were doing everything, and this was on a rescue, and a person had a heart attack during
Oh,
the
okay.
event, and so they were not a direct result of storm or tree falling on them, anything like that.
Right.
And I credit our folks for we got out there and got in front of it. We were screaming from the rafters, don't do this, be safe, be prepared, go and clean your roof gutter drains, right? Simple things like that to have your prevent damage from your home.
Yeah.
We worked on that hard, and so I think that's why we were able to not have, and we were able to turn around and quickly respond west and north to help neighboring counties.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Donald, we're going to wrap up part one here. We'll come back for part two, where we continue our conversation about emergency management. And I think we're going to switch a little bit more towards the, I guess, recovery mission, right? After you go through the process and rebuilding. And obviously, you guys are still going through that as we speak, I would imagine. We'll come back in part two. I'm Joe Turner. This is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast. And Donald Duncan, the city or county manager for Caldwell County, has been our guest today. And we're going to come back next week for part two. So stay tuned. Thank you very much.